I'm Janine Seitetsu Larsen, one of the senior Dharma teachers with Empty Moon Zen Sanghas and resident priest of the Bright Cloud Zen practice groups in Seattle and Woodinville, Washington. Here's a koan. Two great swordsmen are dueling, one confident in his experience and reputation, the other younger, unknown to his rival, mysterious. As they battle, it becomes clear that both are extraordinarily skilled. The older swordsman, astonished to be confronted with such a challenge, finally stands back and stares. He has to ask, "Who are you?" "No one of consequence," replies the other. "I must know," says the first. "Get used to disappointment," is the reply, and the fight is rejoined. This moment of Zen, presented in the charmingly clever 1987 movie The Princess Bride, was a moment of awakening for me long before I encountered the Buddha's noble truths. Disappointment had plagued me throughout my life. As a child, when the excitement of a family outing was once again spoiled by my father's alcoholism. As a young adult, when my first love was crushed, as the emerging mental illness of my sweetheart became undeniable. As I watched my mother sit for hours ruminating, when my parents' marriage dissolved, my father immediately remarrying, and she going along with her life, but also continually reviewing all the reasons she was alone at that age. What had happened to all of her happily ever afters? As a mother and a spouse myself, when I had been very clear and given plenty of notice about my expectations for an upcoming birthday of consequence to me, and nothing came of it. Disappointment. And then this line in a movie. I suddenly realized that none of it was subject to my failure to plan or to behave in a particular way or to skillfully manage a certain trajectory, that there are certain variables in life that are beyond my control, regardless of how painstakingly I devoted myself to developing a skill and experience and breadth of imagination and the mastery of detail that would allow me to satisfy my anticipations. All along, I should have realized that what I really needed to do was get used to disappointment. Disappointment is part of the human experience. It is a regular source of the suffering taught by the Buddha in explaining four great truths: that life is regularly filled with suffering and dissatisfaction, that we tend to pile on to pain and trauma through unwillingness to accept the things that didn't or did stay as they were, that we could in fact decide not to get stuck in that self-inflicted mire, and that the way out was to follow the Eightfold Path. Brilliant marketing, don't you think? But wait, there's more. But you know, there is more. What other perspectives could we take in looking at our situations besides the mono lens that we are using? How might we cut through the story we're telling ourselves and create new possibilities? How can we de-weaponize our internal and external voice? How can we make wise choices in what we do each moment? And as we consider our vocation, our calling, how does our work and career support healthy community and wholeness for all living beings and the earth itself? How can we work diligently to increase our positive impact? How can our Zen practice help us stay awake and be awake to everything? How can we deepen practice to stay focused on our intentions and in harmony with a greater consciousness, the Eightfold Path. You may have noticed that when I shared examples of my own disappointments, they were all about relationships with others. Of course so. This is part of the great and inseparable triple jewel of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That last facet reminds us that we are not meant to sail all by ourselves on the vast and deep sea of the Dharma, with the gift of the Buddha's teachings as the great wind that empowers our course through skillfully executing tacks and jibes. Sangha, this community of peers along the way, is in fact the boat we depend on to stay afloat, the sails we trim and loosen together, the sometimes subtle and sometimes forceful correction of each hand on lines, tillers, halyards, bumpers, and anchors, the voicing of depth readings, map bearings, stars and shoals, sightings of land and hazards, mournful shanties, and exuberant jigs. Sangha, with our collection of human failings and hopes, grace, grief, and grievances, is at times harmonious and at times dissonant. Same with all human relationship, in group experience and one-to-one. Relationship, even when grounded in love and best intent, is marked regularly with disappointment. When we are disappointed in our relationships, we can be devastated. We can react with anger and aversion. When we are disappointed in ourselves as the cause of hurt, whether to ourselves or to others, we can react with shame. But disappointment, I have come to believe, is the proving ground of relationship. When the bonds and covenants of relationship are broken, we are tested. How will we respond? Leave the relationship in a flurry of hateful acts meant to destroy the other or others? Silently disappear, so tipped over by the breach that we can no longer face it? Devote the rest of our lives to bitterness or anguish, protecting our wounds and retreating from joy? Or might we see disappointment as the flag of emotion that signals something important is in need of repair? Each disappointment is a call to reassess, to examine the source of our hurt or anger, or whatever emotion is arising, to consider this relationship as the bread of life, proofing it by allowing it to rest and rise, to reform before we decide it's ready for the oven. The leavening in this dough is our love, remember? We have to trust that this will do its work and give us a nutritious result that comes from the necessary steps of kneading and punching down. And when steel is shaped into a useful tool or material, the exposure to heat so that it will be malleable and that heat can cause it to deform or lose its strength if it isn't skillfully managed. Disappointment is a warning sound that we need to lower the heat or we'll destroy the tempering that allows it to serve its purpose with consistent and reliable strength. It's a delicate balance, applying tempering to get your material so that it won't be brittle and can be resharpened when it gets dull. Disappointment in a relationship reminds us that we can't just throw a good knife in a drawer and ignore it as it gets banged around, or forget to clean it after use, or try to cut a tender tomato with a blade that's dull as a butter spreader. None of these metaphors are perfect, of course, but I am intrigued with the similarities in language. Emotions are valuable pointers, calling us to apply skill carefully and caringly before someone gets hurt. Another koan for you, one of my favorites, this time from a more traditional Zen source. A student asks the teacher, When times of great difficulty visit us, how should we meet them? The teacher replies, welcome. So allow your practice to embrace getting used to disappointment. The disappointment isn't the failure. It's an invitation to a new response, to try again and again and again. Not every relationship can be saved, and not every relationship should be abandoned just because it has been marked by disappointment. What will you choose? Thank you.